And I just don't think Virginia Tech is very good this year. And West Virginia is not a good football team, and they got the very best of them last night. Virginia Tech just made too many mistakes. And when you're not a talented football team, you're truly not going to win football games when you make that many mistakes, and they did. All right, let's move on. It's time to bring in Mike Bernard from OTM Sports out in Las Vegas. Mike, how are you doing this morning?
Doing well, Coach. Good to be on as always.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. A little abbreviated version of Inside the Numbers this Friday. Uh, we've looked at some games. We talked about this and bantered back and forth. And I think we've got three really good games that we're going to talk about. Let's start out with Clemson and Wake Forest. Clemson number 5, Wake Forest number 21. This is a noon kick on ABC, noon Eastern time, 11 Central, ABC. And, it's easy for me just to go with the Tigers here. College football fans, even some Clemson fans, really don't appreciate what Dabo's built there. They lead this series 69-17-1. The Demon Deacons, their last win was back in 2008. I think playing against Hugh Freeze's offense last week, I think that's going to help Wake Forest in this. And it's being played at Wake Forest. It's an early game. It's going to be no surprise to me if Wake Forest pulls the upset here.
Well, Coach, both teams do come in unbeaten. Here's the thing. Clemson's owned Wake Forest. And even last year, which was a down year, down for Clemson, Clemson was only favored by 3.5 points, and they won that game 48-27. They've won 6 straight at Wake. The last 3 times they've been to Wake Forest, they won by 24, by 60, and by 22. Even though I don't like laying big numbers on the road, I'm going to lean to Clemson here.
Let's move on. Number 20, Florida at number 11, Tennessee. This is the prime time afternoon game for CBS and SEC. Once upon a time, this game decided who would represent the SEC West in Atlanta. It was just, they were punching their ticket this early in the season. The first 10 games of the SEC championship, they were either Florida or Tennessee. They've made 18 appearances overall between the two. But this year, it's a little bit different story, of course. The road to Athens, or the road to Atlanta, goes through Athens, of course. Anthony Richardson, let's talk about him real quick. Florida quarterback. We know he's got a ton of talent, has been heralded as one of the best naturally talented quarterbacks Florida's ever had. And at times it's shown, but he's been very inconsistent his entire time with the Gators. Most people thought that Billy Napier could come in and cure that, but thus far he hasn't. Now, up in Knoxville, Josh Heupel, he has steadied the Vol Navy. This is their highest ranking since 2016, and it's only the second time that they've been ranked this high since 2006. Now, Mike, I know this sounds crazy, but if Tennessee can get by Florida and LSU, they'll be undefeated when Alabama comes to town the third Saturday in October. But listen, Tennessee, they can't look that far ahead right now. First things first, they need to see if they can take care of the Gators.
Yeah, and this is unusual territory. I mean, Tennessee is a 10.5-point favorite. Coach, Florida's owned this series. They've won 16 out of 17, and that goes all the way back to year 2000. Florida's won 9 out of 11 trips to Knoxville. Look, Tennessee has not been favored by more than 7 points over Florida ever, okay, as far as the database goes back. They're a favorite, so bettors beware, because Tennessee is favored by 10.5 points. And it's real easy. I'm going to go with history here and play Florida. I'm not impressed with the Gators. I'm not that impressed with Richardson. He's not throwing touchdown passes. He can run. He's got good wheels, but he's not making it happen with his arm. So with that said, I'm going to lean to history here because, Tennessee's beaten Florida by 10 points one time in those past couple of decades, but not more than 10.5.
I agree with you on Richardson. Love him or hate him, Dan Mullen is an outstanding quarterback coach. And if Dan Mullen couldn't take all that athletic ability and and channel it into being a Division I quarterback, I don't think Billy Napier can either.
Good point.
All right, let's move on to the night game, the ESPN primetime game. It's number 10 Arkansas, number 23 Texas A&M. Mike, I think this is the premier matchup of the day, at least for me. Maybe because there's so much, I won't say drama, but there's so much intrigue going on at Texas A&M right now. And then Arkansas, you just got to love Sam Pittman and what he's done. And sort of like the Florida-Tennessee matchup, Texas A&M has pretty much dominated Arkansas, over the recent history. The Hogs have only won this matchup one time since 2011, and that was last year. Arkansas showed last week that they have the talent, they have resolve to fight back through adversity, and they can come back and win a game. I mean, they came from 17 down last week to defeat Bobby Petrino and Missouri State. In the Brett Bielema days and the Chad Marsh days, Arkansas loses that game. Now, to me, the Aggies, they're still an enigma. Did A&M beat a better Miami team last week, or did hurricane mistakes just gift wrap the win for the Aggies? I don't know. But I know this week, and I'm going to steal Sam Pittman's metaphor, the Hogs, they're going to bring the hard liquor to the party and get the win.
Well, I said on Sunday's recap show that if Arkansas was getting 4 points or more, I was going to take them. Well, that's not out there. There's only the Aggies are only favored by 1.5 or 2 points. Now, last week you talked about it. Arkansas was in that classic look-ahead spot. Now, Petrino and his kids, they had that game circled, but look, Arkansas kids, they didn't care anything about that game, and it showed. Now it's time for big boy football in Dallas because Texas A&M, they've underperformed. There's no doubt, but they still have a very solid defensive front. They don't impress me in any other phase except that front seven. I'm not going to get the 4 points I wanted, so I'm going to go with the under in this game. Yeah,
I had a caller mention that, hey, look, you got to understand that Arkansas, that, they were just, they were fired up. They played the best they could play. Bobby Petrino's this great coach. I said, look, let me tell you something. The Bobby Petrino mess at Arkansas, that happened when these kids were like in the third grade. They could give a flip about Bobby Petrino and what he did at Arkansas.
Exactly. They don't know if they're talking about Rick Pitino or Bobby Petrino. Those kids these days, that was so long ago, that's not even on their mind.
Exactly. All right, Mike, let's move on to our pick of the weeks. So far, I hate to jinx us, but so far, so good.
Absolutely. 2-0 last week, 2-0 the previous week. So we only started it 2 weeks ago. So you may start with my pick.
Yeah, go ahead and start with your pick because okay. I've got one that's I don't know, it may shock you, it may not, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, we previewed 3 marquee games. Well, these teams that I'm going to look at, they're never going to be on the marquee matchup. It's Louisiana at Louisiana Monroe, the Cajuns at the Warhawks. Last week, Louisiana Monroe, they got beat up on the scoreboard, but also physically down in Tuscaloosa. Now, the Cajuns, they're coming off their first loss after 15 consecutive wins. Of course, you mentioned Napier. He used to be their coach. Levi Lewis is the all-time touchdown passing leader. He's gone from that last year's team. Now, they were the Sun Belt champions last year, and Sun Belt last year and this year showing it's a very underrated conference. Now, the Cajuns, I believe, are going to have more fans in the seats up in Monroe. Listen to this stat. So the last 19 times these teams have played, the road team has covered 18 times. I believe the road team is 22-1-1 the last 24 meetings. So whatever causes that, whether the road team is favored or underdog, the road team is dominated. And I'm going to go with that history here. I'm going to take the Raging Cajuns. Now, the line opened 13. It was bet down to 9. So if you get it less than 9.5 or less, it's a play. But my play here is the Raging Cajuns minus the number on the road.
All right. Well, my upset picks are straight up wins. And, I debated going with Vandy over Alabama or maybe Kent State over Georgia, but I kind of pushed those games to the side. Uh, Last week, Michigan State goes out to Seattle and they just get the business handed to them. I referred to it as they were sleepless in Seattle, a nod to the movie. By the time they came to life in that game, it was just too late. I think they are the most talented team. Don't underestimate what Washington is, but Michigan State is still a good football team. I don't think they should have dropped totally out of the rankings. And one thing about disciples of Nick Saban, and Mel Tucker is one, they rarely lose in back-to-back weeks. The Gophers are favored in East Lansing. Not going to happen. Okay, to choose the old Dana Carvey, George Bush imitation, not going to happen. I'm going to 3-0 this week as Michigan State wins easily.